What's good, everyone? Today I'm here with Rick to talk about all things blockchain law related. So tell us about your journey into law, and then what really compelled you to jump into Web3 and being a first mover in terms of being an attorney in this space.
Yeah, it's a really great question. So I got my start in 2016 when actually I got an infomercial email about Bitcoin in my email. And a lot of people think it's a scam, whatever, but it kind of started me down the rabbit hole, right? And so before I knew it, I was learning about, obviously different blockchains, different use cases, different utilities. And I've always had an entrepreneurial mind at heart, right? So I started work with a lot of startups during the ICO phase back in 17 and 18, worked with a lot of projects. But I always had law school in the back of my mind, and I always thought, hey, what's a great way to help people? And then I started kind of putting two and two together because I quickly realized, hey, there's a lot of legal gray area right now surrounding, obviously, blockchain, the Web 3.0 space just in general. So I realized that there was a need that I could step in and help a lot of emerging projects. So fast forward today, I'm here today.
Awesome, man. It's important. A lot of collections got into this space without knowing the repercussions. Tax speaking, anything, contracts. So what companies, what types of projects have you worked with, and what kind of learning lessons would you give future founders?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great question. So I've worked with actually a lot of different gaming projects, a lot of more of your traditional NFT mint projects as well. As far as what I would advise, just as a general basis for a lot of these projects, really look at what you're wanting your NFT to actually do. Is it just more of a simple kind of one-to-one art collection, or are you wanting to do a little bit more? Some projects are like, hey, we wanted to give, an exclusive membership into a club, right? Into a DAO, for instance, right? Or some people are like, hey, I want to be able to give you residual revenue streams from whenever we do secondary sales, right? All of those different aspects are things you want to keep in mind. And the more you want to do of those things, you'll probably at some point want to kind of consult an attorney who's in this space who can give you kind of proper guidance, because you really don't want to end up in a position where your project is being coming after by different regulators. Yeah. And I'll say this as well, as somebody who is a U.S. attorney, who lives and breathes here in the United States, who's born and raised here, I want a lot of these NFT projects to be here. So hopefully we get some changes in that in the coming future.
And I like how you mentioned offshore filing. An interesting and very popular topic in Web3. A lot of people go offshore because of inconsistent regulation, if any regulation in the US. Yep. Obviously this type of technology is something that disrupts a lot of frameworks, so they are procrastinating it to the end of the life. So how do you feel that pushes other people to the Bahamas, to these different Puerto Rico for tax freedom? Yep. How do these repercussions, how do you see them playing out in the future? Do you think the US comes on board, or will people continuously be pushed to go overseas to?
Yeah. Well, I think honestly it's a tug of war right now. I think in the very early infancy of the blockchain space in general, you didn't have a lot of money behind it for actual lobbying efforts, different organizations that are advocating for the space. But today it's completely different. You have actual lobbying firms in DC that are working with a lot of our legislators on pushing back. And then likewise on the other side, you have different legislators. You have the SEC, Gary Gensler, all those guys that are saying, hey, we really want to kind of drive this out or completely control it. I'm somebody that says, you know what, we need to foster this innovation. We need to not push it away, because then, again, a lot of smart-minded individuals, they're going to go elsewhere. And then the US is going to get left behind, and we'll wake up in 5 or 10 years, and all these projects are overseas, and we're going to wonder what happened. So the battle is starting today, and I hope I can have my small part in to help out.
They don't want it to come here, obviously, right? We're already seeing the US dollar losing its rank as the global reserve currency. A lot of oil, different petroleum is being in the ruble, in the yuan. Things are changing. Saudi isn't funding us like they used to. How do you see, whether yes or no, if the US adopts, how do you see that affecting the US dollar and the currency system?
Well, I think it's kind of a twofold answer. So I guess kind of win the battle, and we do start putting forward thoughtful regulations surrounding digital assets in general, including obviously NFTs. I think you're going to obviously see a lot more companies and projects want to stay here. But with that said, I think the Fed is still going to push forward with, I think, really regulation that's going to really allow them to control from a tax perspective, from an issuance perspective. But I also think too, Fed now, obviously Britain's looking at some different options. And I think for somebody who is obviously not a Bitcoin maximalist, but I look at the underlying principles of, hey, decentralization, freedom of choice, privacy. And I think when you look at all these principles, that's kind of what America's founded on, right? Your right to privacy, your right to free speech. And if we start going away from that, what happens to our country as a whole, right? And that's where, again, I think being on the forefront of that battle is going to be so vitally important. So what I would say for some of these projects too, don't be scared to kind of have that conversation with an attorney or even just some people in your community and say, hey, you know what? We want you guys to be here. If you're a U.S. investor, we want you to feel safe and feel like, hey, you can, participate in our project and be a part of what we're building here. And we want to be able to kind of give that layer of comfortability to a lot of these projects and the participants that they have no idea right now, right? It's a legal gray area for a lot of these projects.
Yeah, man, there's a lot of friction to be removed from the process that gets a lot of corporations, big companies. We've seen a lot of big corporations, celebrities jump in, and now we're seeing lawsuits. People not realizing, they're promoting something and they're not doing due diligence, and people are losing money, and it's on their hand. It's a very fickle situation. So I appreciate all your input. Hopefully people learn more about blockchain law and how it'll progress over the years. So I appreciate it, man.